Welcome back to the show, everyone. After that Delta CRJ 900 flipped over in Toronto,
Oh, yeah.
we just had to dig deeper.
Yeah,
Everyone thankfully survived.
they did, but it could have been a lot worse. Some people did end up in the hospital,
Right.
and I can't even imagine. One passenger even said it was like crashing onto the ceiling, which had become the floor.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's pretty wild.
So while we can't say for sure what caused that crash,
Right.
we thought it'd be a great idea to kind of look at the bigger picture.
Yeah,
Are there any warning lights flashing in the industry right now?
exactly.
Yeah.
We don't want to jump to any conclusions,
Yeah.
but let's see what we find.
Okay, so let's start with something that really caught my eye. Just weeks before this Delta incident happened,
Okay.
hundreds of FAA support staff were let go as part of the government downsizing effort.
Oh, wow.
So the timing of that is definitely eyebrow-raising.
Yeah, and the union that represents those employees had some pretty strong words about it.
Really?
Yeah, their leader called the firings unconscionable. Wow.
Especially considering, all these recent incidents, and they're saying, look, we're already stretched thin, and this just adds more pressure.
It's interesting because this downsizing effort was actually spearheaded by Elon Musk
Oh,
through his Department of Government Efficiency. And after the Delta crash, even Senator Chuck Schumer criticized this whole thing.
wow.
He specifically pointed to the FAA firings as a potential threat to safety.
I see. Yeah, it definitely makes you think about the trade-offs between efficiency and safety.
Right.
How much can you cut before it starts to impact the well-being of the entire system?
Exactly. And this whole concern about staffing shortages, it isn't just coming from the support staff either.
Oh, really?
Remember that American Airlines collision with the Army helicopter we talked about?
Oh, yes, that was terrible.
Well, afterward, the head of the Air Traffic Controllers Union said they barely have more controllers than last year, even though air traffic's steadily increasing.
Wow.
And the chair of the NTSB also pointed to staffing shortages, particularly among air traffic controllers.
Right. As a major source of strain in the entire system, she even said, where you end up with that is distraction, fatigue. You are missing things. You are forgetting things.
That's a pretty scary thought
Yeah.
when you think about how much responsibility they have on their shoulders.
No kidding.
Ugh.
Okay, so we've got potential understaffing across multiple critical roles.
Right.
What else jumps out at you?
Well, this Delta plane, the CRJ 900, it was 16 years old.
Okay.
And that's not ancient for an aircraft, but it does make you think about whether aging aircraft in general might be contributing to this, strain on the system. Are they requiring more maintenance, more attention to detail, things like that?
That's a great point. And speaking of maintenance, I'm always fascinated by the human element in these stories.
Yeah.
We found this research paper on human factors in aviation maintenance.
Okay.
And it really gets into how even seemingly small errors by mechanics can have huge consequences.
That's true. We tend to focus on the pilots. When we talk about aviation safety, but the people who keep those complex machines running, they're just as important.
Right.
This paper actually states that 15% of accidents between 1982 and 1991 were linked to maintenance.
Wow.
And even a minor slip-up, like an engine shutdown caused by a maintenance error, can cost an airline a fortune.
Yeah, they estimate it to be around $500,000 per incident.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. But what really stood out to me in this paper was the research on shift work
Okay.
and how it affects maintenance technicians.
Right.
Did you know that a lot of hangar maintenance happens overnight across multiple shifts?
I can see how that would be efficient, but it would definitely disrupt sleep schedules.
Exactly. And this research points to a whole bunch of potential problems: sleep disruption, GI issues, psychological stress,
Oh, wow.
all of which can lead to errors.
Yeah, it's like setting them up for failure.
Right.
You've got these highly skilled technicians working on these incredibly complex machines in the middle of the night,
Right.
and any little mistake have these huge consequences.
And here's the kicker. There are no specific regulations for shift turnover procedures
Oh, wow.
in aircraft maintenance, just a vague requirement for proper completion of tasks.
That seems like a pretty big oversight.
It does, right?
Makes you wonder if crucial information is being lost during those handovers.
Exactly. And this research found that almost half of maintenance errors are what they call skill-based,
Okay.
meaning the person knew what to do, they had the skills and the training, but they slipped up anyway.
Probably due to fatigue or distraction or something.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that even the best of the best are susceptible to human error,
Right.
especially when you add in these difficult work environments and fatigue into the mix.
Okay, so we've got potential staffing shortages,
Yeah.
aging aircraft, and this whole human factor in maintenance work.
Right.
We're starting to see a lot of potential points of stress in the system.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about one of the biggest elephants in the room,
What's that?
the aging air traffic control systems.
Oh, right, that GAO report.
Yeah, get ready for this one.
Hit me with it.
Right, this report states that 37% of air traffic control systems are straight up unsustainable,
Wow.
and another 39% are potentially so.
So that's over 3/4
And
of the systems that are keeping our skies safe.
yeah, it's pretty crazy.
But what does unsustainable even mean? Are we talking about systems on the verge of collapse?
Not necessarily on the verge of collapse, but definitely outdated, difficult to maintain, and nearing the end of their life.
So it's like running a modern airport with tech from the 90s.
Exactly. It's just not going to be as efficient or as safe as it could be.
You're not wrong, but they have to be working on upgrading these systems, right?
Whoa.
We can't be stuck with outdated tech in such a critical area.
That's where it gets even more concerning.
Oh, no.
The report found that the FAA hasn't prioritized modernizing the most critical systems.
Oh, wow.
Some of these won't be updated for another 6 to 10 years.
Wait, are you serious? We're talking about systems directly tied to safety.
Yeah.
And they're saying it could be a decade before they're brought up to date.
Yeah.
That just seems incredibly risky, especially with air traffic only expected to increase.
It does raise some serious questions about the FAA's priorities.
For sure.
And to make matters worse, the report blames this partly on lengthy modernization processes.
Okay.
Apparently, some of these upgrades can take 15 to 19 years to complete.
That's almost an entire generation.
Yeah.
By the time they finish these updates, the tech will probably be obsolete again.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. And on top of that, Congress is now pushing for an audit to try and figure out the risks of these outdated systems.
Yeah. They're basically saying, hey, FAA, you're not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
And we need to know what's at stake here.
Right. And this kind of brings us full circle back to the staffing shortages we talked about earlier. If the systems themselves are outdated and the people maintaining them are overworked and understaffed, is that just a disaster waiting to happen?
That's the question we need to be asking, and it requires a serious and thorough investigation to get to the bottom of it.
We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still more to explore in part 2. We'll look at some potential solutions and what all of this means for the future of air travel.
Okay.
So make sure to join us then. I'm still thinking about all that stuff from part 1.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
It is. We talked about staffing shortages and those aging systems.
Right.
The risks of aging aircraft, the human factor in maintenance work.
Yeah, it kind of makes you think twice about getting on a plane, doesn't it?
It really does. I have to admit, I'm feeling a little bit uneasy about flying.
Yeah, I understand that, but remember, awareness is the first step toward positive change, right?
That's true.
Now that we know about these challenges, we can actually start asking the right questions and demanding better from the people who are responsible for our safety in the skies.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What can be done to address these issues? Are there solutions?
There are definitely potential solutions out there, both in the short term and the long term.
Yeah.
Some of them are more immediate, like focusing on those urgent staffing shortages.
Right.
But others require a longer-term commitment to really transform the industry.
Let's start with the short-term stuff.
Yeah.
What can we do right now to make flying safer?
Well, addressing those staffing shortages has got to be at the top of the list.
Okay.
We need more air traffic controllers, more support staff, and more qualified maintenance technicians.
Right.
It's not just about filling empty positions, though.
Nope.
It's about having skilled and well-rested people in those critical roles,
Right.
and creating a supportive work environment where they feel valued and respected.
Makes sense. So how do we do that?
Well, investing in training programs and recruitment efforts is a good start, but we also need to make these jobs more attractive.
Right. It's a competitive market out there.
Exactly. So offering competitive salaries, better benefits, and a decent work-life balance.
Okay. What about those aging air traffic control systems we talked about?
Right.
Can we really wait a decade for those upgrades?
Well, that's where prioritizing comes in. The FAA needs to focus on modernizing those most critical systems first, even if it means finding creative ways to fund those upgrades or finding ways to speed up those modernization processes.
Yeah, maybe they could take a page from Elon Musk's playbook when it comes to streamlining operations.
It's a thought.
Kind of ironic, considering he was the one who pushed for that government downsizing in the first place.
Right.
But if the private sector can find ways to innovate and adapt quickly, surely the government can too.
I agree. There's really no excuse for safety-critical infrastructure to be lagging behind in terms of technology.
Okay, so we've talked about staffing and system upgrades.
Right.
What about the human factor in maintenance work? How do we address that, especially with those late night shifts and the lack of clear procedures for those handovers?
Well, that's where better training and more robust error management systems come into play.
Okay.
Tools like that maintenance error decision aid, or META, which was developed by Boeing,
Yeah.
can really help technicians identify and mitigate those potential risks.
Hmm.
And, those proactive error detection methods like the computer-based HF audit, those can be really effective too in catching those mistakes before they lead to something serious.
So it sounds like we need a combination of better tech, better training, and better procedures.
Exactly. It's about having multiple layers of protection in place.
Okay. And what about the whole culture of safety within these organizations?
That's huge. We need to move away from just ticking boxes and following procedures.
Yeah.
It's got to be about creating an environment where everyone feels comfortable speaking up
Right.
if they see a potential problem, regardless of their experience level.
So fostering that open communication is key.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got some potential solutions on the table.
Right.
But where does all this leave us for the future of air travel? Are we heading for more turbulence?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's hard to predict the future with any certainty, but I think there are reasons to be both concerned and hopeful.
Okay, let's start with the concern part. Paint me a worst-case scenario. What happens if we don't fix these problems?
Well, in a worst-case scenario, we could see an increase in incidents and accidents.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't just be a tragedy in terms of human life.
Right.
It would also have a huge impact on the industry as a whole.
People might be less willing to fly. Airlines could face stricter regulations.
Exactly.
Costs could go up.
It wouldn't be pretty.
No. But you said there are reasons to be hopeful too, right?
Right. Think about all the advances in technology we've seen.
Right.
Predictive maintenance robotics, big data analytics. These tools have the potential to really change how we approach aviation safety.
So we're talking about being able to anticipate problems before they even happen.
Exactly, instead of just reacting to them after the fact.
So what would that look like?
Imagine being able to predict when a part is likely to fail based on its usage patterns and the environment.
Okay.
Or using robots to do inspections in those hard-to-reach areas.
Oh, wow.
Eliminating the risk of human error and fatigue.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, technology has the potential to be a real game changer when it comes to safety and efficiency.
But technology alone isn't enough, right?
No, it's not. It needs to be coupled with a strong commitment to safety from everyone involved.
So we're talking about airlines, regulators, manufacturers, employees.
Everybody.
It's about creating that culture where safety is the top priority.
Exactly. Working together, sharing information, learning from mistakes, and being proactive instead of reactive.
We can't wait for another tragedy to happen before we make a change.
Exactly.
So it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done, but there's also hope for a safer, more efficient future for air travel.
I believe there is.
Okay.
It's up to all of us to demand better, to hold those in power accountable, and to support those working hard to keep us safe.
Well said. And on that note, we'll be right back for part 3, where we'll dive into some listener questions
Sounds good.
and share our final thoughts on this whole story. Don't go anywhere. All right, we are back for the final part of our deep dive.
Time for some listener questions.
Yeah, we always love hearing from you guys after these complex topics.
It's so interesting to see what's on everyone's mind.
Okay, first up, this one comes up a lot. Do you feel safe flying after learning all this?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
How do we even answer that?
Well, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, knowledge is power.
Okay.
Understanding those risks, both human and systemic, it helps you make more informed decisions.
So maybe it's not about feeling safer, it's about flying smarter.
Exactly. Ask questions. Do your research pay attention to those pre-flight briefings?
Right.
You're not just a passive passenger. You're an active participant in your own safety.
I love that. Okay. Next question, and this one's a bit more specific. Do you think the push to modernize air traffic control systems is too slow?
Well, based on that GAO report, it's hard to argue otherwise.
Right.
The fact that some of those critical systems might not be updated for another decade, that's definitely concerning.
Especially when you think about how quickly technology advances in other fields.
Right. It's almost funny.
Yeah.
My phone gets a software update every other week, but the system guiding planes through the sky is running on tech from who knows when.
Exactly. And it's not just about having the latest gadgets either.
Right. Those outdated systems are more vulnerable to glitches, to cyber attacks, and they might not even be able to handle the increasing air traffic.
Right. It's a safety issue.
Plain and simple.
And like we said before, it's not just a technology problem.
Nope.
You can't just throw new software at an overworked, understaffed workforce and expect miracles.
Exactly. Modernization needs to be a team effort. We need to invest in both the technology and the people who are using it and maintaining it.
Okay, last question for today, and this one's interesting. With all this talk about pilotless planes in the future, do you think human error will become less of a factor in aviation?
Ah, the age-old automation question. It's a
Ugh.
fascinating one. On one hand, yeah, autonomous technology has the potential to reduce some types of human error.
Like pilot fatigue?
Right, or decision-making under pressure.
Like those autopilot systems we have now have made flying safer in a lot of ways.
Definitely. But here's the thing, even with pilotless planes, humans are still going to be involved.
In what way?
We'll be designing the systems, writing the software, maintaining the aircraft.
Right.
The human element, it's not going to disappear. It'll just shift to different areas.
So we'll have a whole new set of challenges to worry about.
Exactly. Like, how do we ensure the reliability and the security of these AI systems? How do we prevent bias in their programming? How do we make sure they don't have unintended consequences?
That's a lot to think about.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of all this new technology, but we can't forget those lessons we've learned about human oversight and ethical consideration.
Right. The future of aviation, it's full of possibilities, but it's clear that humans are going to continue to play a big role.
For better or for worse.
Well, we've explored some of those potential stress points in the industry, staffing those aging systems, the human factor in maintenance, and of course, the whole question of automation.
Lots to consider.
It is. What are your takeaways? Do you feel differently about flying now?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Head over to social media and let us know.
And if there are any topics you want us to deep dive into, send them our way.
That's all for today. Until next time, fly safe, everyone.